Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tracy Lepicki. I am the Associate Director of the Center on Education and Training for Employment. As Kim mentioned earlier, we are one of the centers as a part of the Education and Human Ecology College. And I am going to talk to you a little bit about SEAT's approaches to state funding. Being third on the agenda, there are a lot of things I'm going to say that are going to reiterate some of the points that you've already heard. And that sort of assures me that we're kind of moving in the right direction with some of our approaches. SEAT has been in the business of pursuing grants and contracts for about 50 years. I, of course, have not been at SEAT for 50 years, but I've been there for about 15, and I think we have some good tried and true approaches, and obviously we're always looking for new approaches too, especially that network. That looks very exciting to me. So some of the things might feel intuitive to you, and maybe there are some things that might be some different ideas that will help you in your own research. From looking at some of the feedback that you provided when you registered for the event, some of the ideas that came to me are things like, okay, how do I get started? Where do I look? And how do I keep up with the timelines that the sponsor sets that may or may not work with my timelines and the constraints that I'm under? So I'm hoping to address some of those kinds of ideas, starting with where to get started. What I've put up here is a link to the procurement website for the state of Ohio. It's housed on the Department of Administrative Services website. It's another approach to digging in and doing some online research in terms of what is available in the state. You can search a whole variety of ways, and I'm going to show you a screenshot of the site in a second. But it's a cross-agency site that basically collects the needs of the state in terms of the goods and services that the state's interested in purchasing, acquiring from a whole host of different kinds of vendors, of which Ohio State clearly would be one. And one of the approaches that we take at SEAT is we do monitor this site weekly. There are staff who are on this site every other day, just to see what else is going on in the state. Beyond the kinds of things that we might naturally look for, sometimes you don't know exactly where the category of funding, something that you might be interested in pursuing, it might be organized in a way that you wouldn't necessarily intuitively think to look under. So sometimes crawling the site is helpful from that perspective. In addition, one of the other approaches in terms of where to look is to go right to the actual website of the agencies, the departments, the boards, the commissions, and I've put that link here as well. The ohio.gov/agencies page will give you an alphabetical listing of all of the agencies in Ohio, along with contact information, their websites. Sometimes there's a name of a person that you could contact directly. A third mechanism that is useful at SEAT for how we approach looking for funding opportunities is to seek out the specific websites and click into the communication departments within those agencies. It's valuable, looking at what are the trends, what's going on. That was sort of mentioned in one form or another already. Getting on those email lists, you can get a sense of where the meetings are, what's going on, what is the state funding, what is the state interested in talking about from that particular agency's perspective. So that can be very helpful as well. This is a screenshot of the procurement site on the Department of Administrative Services webpage. They've just recently redesigned the search page and relaunched it in October. So this is the site specifically. Hopefully, I know that some of the information on the site says that the redesign was based on trying to create some better interagency connections with the kinds of results and the way users were using the page prior. So I haven't had a chance to dig in myself yet, but I'm excited to see how this functions as compared to the way the site was organized prior. In the top right of this page, actually, also is a link that goes to the alphabetical listing of all the state agencies. And it's amazing to me to click on that and see the whole list of state agencies that exist, areas that I wouldn't have thought of prior to actually kind of digging around and looking into it. So another aspect of sort of being organized in how you go about your funding is getting yourself ready. There are constraints that you can't necessarily control, like when a particular funder is going to release a certain RFP. But there are things that you can do in advance to get yourself organized so that you're poised to jump on that new opportunity as it arises. Some of the suggestions in this area would be boilerplating, coming up with capacity statements, the biographical sketches of your key research team, so that you have those ready to go and drop into a proposal. In most of the time, it's the case that there are components of a proposal that are relatively formulaic, and so dropping in some of these pieces, having them ready to go, cuts down on the time it takes for you to produce. You can focus on the design of your project, the extent of the project, the evaluation aspect of the project, rather than the biographical information for your particular key personnel that are participating. In addition, project descriptions, examples of previous work that you've done in this particular arena many times are asked for in proposals, so having a bank of those ready to go in a folder that you can just select those that are most appropriate for this particular proposal that would be most appealing to the sponsor in this particular example would be helpful too. Digital tools, budgeting spreadsheets, having structures already in place that you use on a repetitive basis for how you think about how to cost out your projects. At SEAT, we use Excel spreadsheets with formulas built in to help us, so we're not always starting from scratch when we're trying to conceptualize what is it actually going to cost to accomplish this particular project that I'm engaged in proposing. In addition to spreadsheets, templates for project management, for reports, having a specific, already defined approach to how you scope out a project and break it down, what's the work breakdown structure with the key activities, the timeline, and the resources, whether they be people or supplies or some other resource that you're going to bring to complete that particular scope. Having some of these structures in place really does save time, and like I said, you could focus on your design and the project itself rather than some of these maybe more administrative components that sit around the work. Earlier today, I went online to see what was out there in terms of some of the free tools, and if you just do a search on project management, there are a whole host of sample spreadsheets, of sample forms that you can pull down and use. Or you could use something like Microsoft Project, which can be a pretty daunting software itself, depending on where you are in your use of it. But there are a whole host of digital tools that are out there and free. It's just a matter of determining what it is you're trying to find, and rather than reinvent, and then going out and searching for them specifically. The other aspect of looking for resources that is really paramount in the work that we do at SEAT is looking at the relationships with the funders, potential funders, existing funders. They're all kind of funders. We all have to manage those relationships, either initiating them or kind of continuing to cultivate them over a course of time. So some of the points that I've added here include getting to know the potential funders. Cam, I heard you mention that specifically. Jeff, you mentioned it as well. It's very important to get a sense of what's going on in the world of that particular agency that you're interested in courting to support your work that you're interested in pursuing. So looking for networking opportunities, whether that be participating in conferences. At the state level, staff at the center are engaged in a variety of conferences related to their particular interest areas, and being at those events gives you an opportunity to connect with the, in our case many times, the teachers and the administrators that are running the programs that we are helping to improve. And then also you do get a sense at times of what's going on from the state policy level, because some of the staff from those programs as well attend the conferences too. So that's a good opportunity to meet people, to put a face and a name together, to introduce yourself, to make yourself memorable, and engage that particular funder in understanding what it is that your passion is about in your particular research area. When I asked the staff to give me some ideas of things that they would share if they were up here instead of me, one of my colleagues said, determine trends in the micro world. And I thought that was kind of interesting. I think it really just means, what are the pain points? What are the specifics that are of interest or need to be solved or tackled, or are needs for a specific funder? And along with that is that notion of adding value to a funder's current work. We find in our center that, particularly with our existing relationships, if we can add additional value beyond what we're being asked to accomplish, then that sort of helps to build a rapport, helps to show that we go above and beyond, helps to show that we want to have an impact beyond just the particular project that we're engaged in at that moment. And that helps us to be first in mind for the next time around when that sponsor is interested in additional work in that particular area or another area. It goes to the concept of sort of demonstrating your competencies, showing that you can really perform the level of work that is of value to that particular funder. In terms of maintaining existing funder relationships, really all of the above apply, but something that you do have in the sense with an existing relationship is you can connect the dots between what you did before, what you're doing now, and suggest what should come next. And many times that means that you can contribute to the what comes next, and or you can refer that particular sponsor to someone else in your network that might be able to provide that next step for them in the work that they're trying to accomplish through the proposals or the RFPs that they distribute. Another aspect of current funding relationships that is very beneficial for us is referrals. Many times we think of one-offs. We think of the sense that if I do a good job for you as a funder, you might likely talk to one of your colleagues who might also have a similar need. And then, as such, I have good word of mouth recommendation that comes from you, and so we might be able to extend the work, replicate it for another group, and that seems to be a really nice way for us to continue to. It does two things. It many times gets us the next project that we're involved in, but it also sort of reinforces that we're doing quality work that people are proud to talk about and are interested in sharing with their colleagues. Because your reputation is incredibly important, and so if we're being offered from one group to another saying, yeah, they are doing a good job, then that's a really good boost for us in terms of the quality of what we're doing. Sometimes being that project historian, back to the continuity piece, because sometimes with particular funders, it's the case that the program officer who you worked with changes over time. Depending on how long you've been engaged with that particular agency, you can be seen as adding value from the perspective of you have that institutional knowledge or that historical perspective that might inform that next project, independent of whether your program officer remains the same or not. So we find that to be an interesting additional piece that we can add to the work that we do. Just on a personal note, I've been at the center for 15 years, and we have been engaged in a project related to adult basic and literacy education for the state of Ohio since the mid-90s. So my whole 15 years at the center, I have been involved with working with one particular agency at the Department of Higher Ed as they provide professional services to administrators and instructors teaching in adult literacy programs. So I'm in a position where I can say, remember when I first started, this was what some of the priorities were, this is what it looks like now, and because of that history, you might want to anticipate this other condition in the future. So those are just some of the aspects of funder relationships that are really key to the work that we do at the center specifically.